In 40k, you will find that a bunch of things are pretty common, one of which is that the references people pull for it are always pretty cool. Going back to the 80s and even the 70s, you find that what originated to Warhammer Fantasy and 40k and the like were all inspired usually by action movies, but also a bunch of cool-ass authors and literature that a lot of the people who were making the fiction for 40k and fantasy really liked. Tolkien is referenced a lot for Warhammer Fantasy, but in general, the orcs of 40k are goofy and sing-songy because a lot of Tolkien's writing was just kind of like that. They were just super goofy, but if you like power armor, you have to point out its origination with Robert A. Heinlein and, Starship Troopers, Paradise Lost, and more or less every action movie of the time was such a big inspiration of the muscle-bound, gun-toting whack jobs of 40k that it's actually kind of surprising that not a lot of people pointed out. Even looking at the Primarchs, you can see individual references to external media and just history. The Lion and the Knights of the Round Table, Corvus Corax, and I know that the origination of this film and comic franchise was a little bit late, but the Crow. Then you have something like Gilliman and Perturabo, who get a lot of their lore from the history of ancient Greece and Rome, which I think is really, really cool. So to cap off the Primarch series, I decided that it was time I dipped my toes into the sauce that is 40k fan creations and discuss a popular fan Primarch that I think is incredibly creative. With a long-lasting pedigree of intellectual properties that people tend to pull from, I want to see what the fan community of 40k tends to put into their works and just see where they're going with it and just see what they've created.
What the fuck? Bad dog!
God, I love anime. Or at least I kind of do. Okay, I like very specific anime and try to engage in the new stuff, and then just absolutely despise most of it, and immediately go back to rewatching the same 5. Okay, I just end up rewatching Bleach for like the 30th time, but I like Baki. I like the fact that Kaya Jaku looks almost identical to me. I even met and played D&D a few times with his English voice actor. Fun fact, I guess. Cool guy. But if you like anime more than me, which is pretty likely considering, then you will probably adore the Space Maids. The Space Maids are a fan-created faction of Space Marines that Chumichamp, God, I hope I'm saying that right, made to fill a few niches in the building of a 40k Space Marine Legion. Mostly that 40k is so serious and so obsessed with its weirdly stereotypical manly references that they just want to go in the opposite direction and make something so absurd that I genuinely adore it. And thus was one of the reasons why I was so happy to know that they were okay with me covering their faction and even making a lore dump video about them for my Primarch series, and also just so that I can cover the Space Maids in general. So let's talk about their Primarch, Nekona, which is a very fun and cutesy character, especially for such a grimdark setting. Yeah, if you were looking for something hyper serious, you're gonna dig this video, but you know what? Sometimes you just gotta have some fun, not take things too seriously. 40k as a fiction is often too deeply invested in its own seriousness, so much so that it kind of robs it of any fun a lot of times. Like, a lot of people I've met think that orcs should just be brutish monsters more so than they should be a little bit goofy, but I think that's just fucking madness. I think that they should be goofy, but still be threatening in a weird way, I don't know. I'm getting off track here. So, the Primarch, the matriarch, Nekona. She was a lovely lady raised on a planet populated by such a wealth of culturally concentrated cringe that I think you all will enjoy every last second of the story I'm about to tell, or wince so hard you're gonna look like you just sucked on a lemon. But before I do, I just want to have a quick word from my lovely sponsor. If you know anything about me, I had one hell of an energy drink thing back in the day when I was in university. I was pretty well known to drink a boatload of caffeine before going off to classes, of which I would inevitably fail. I wasn't the best academic. But regardless, if there is one thing you know about energy drinks, they are fucking expensive if you drink them regularly. If you were on a student's budget of 3 potato chips and a Slim Jim per day, getting by sometimes wasn't really easy. So when I started to get especially broke, I tried alternatives, and eventually I stumbled onto what I consider widely the best goddamn one in the game. That's Gamer Subs, baby. I keep it no secret that I was the one that actually reached out to them because I loved their drinks. And I'm here to let you know that right now, as of this video Also, going live, you're still in time to take advantage of one of their bigger sales. If you're curious about GamerSupps and wanted to try, now is the time. Using my code BONEZONE or clicking the link in the description or in the pinned comment down below, you don't get 10% off your order, you get a whole 21% off all purchases. But that is literally only going to last like maybe 2 hours after the publish of this video going live, and then it goes back to the 10%. So, pick up some lean with this mystery man on front. Pick up some nuclear bombsicle with this large man on front. Or pick up some cherry limesicle with this, not man on the front. Listen, I'm not that smart here. The sale ends at 2 p.m. EST today, so get your shit fast because you literally don't have much time left. But thanks again to GamerSupps for sponsoring this video as usual, and let's get back to the, cats. Okay, so let's dive in. During the scattering of the Primarchs, Nekona was sent, much like her siblings, to some random planet in the middle of nowhere by the name of Sator. Now, Sator is one of those unfortunate planets to not have many records of the planet they came from, which was Terra. The records they did have were actually weirdly incomplete. So these records are old anime DVDs, and thus the majority of the planet's culture was based around the idea of mostly anime concepts from the mid to late 2000s. I know it's specific, but like, dear God, please follow me on this. Nekona, due to warp-based mutations as well as some genetic fuckery, developed some weird mutations, especially as far as Primarchs go. So the obvious one is Shikibbi, with a cat's tail and cat's ears, but the second one is actually kind of less obvious. See, in the most stable way possible, she is a psyker, kind of like how Magnus, without much training, was able to control his psychic gifts. Nekona wasn't even aware of hers because, okay, we will get there in a little bit, but her gifts are kind of interesting, but like, just put a pin in this. But Nekona had a bit of an interesting time on this weeb planet because it's a planet full of weeaboos who just found an actual cat girl that matured to be over 10 feet tall. It's kind of their idea of what Christ would be like if Christ was a galaxy-conquering cat woman. So, just by virtue of her existence, Nekona likely rose to power pretty quickly, but the thing was, she wasn't a combat and conquering obsessed maniac like her brothers. No, she liked one major thing more than most, which is kind of weird even for Primarchs, and that was cooking. Like, she liked cooking food specifically from the VHS and DVDs that she was watching from the cultural records of Sator. Like, basically, she would see the food that they were cooking in Studio Ghibli films and then be like, man, I gotta make me some of that, which she then learned how to perfect that. But here is where we kind of pull that pin out that I mentioned earlier and where her weird psychic gift comes into play. Because for some reason, when she cooks, a portion of her psychic energy causes that food to gain healing properties. Think of it like Tonio Trussardi from JoJo with his stand to Pearl Jam, where his food somehow can pack a specific nutrient you need to insta-recover from any ailments. And I'm sorry if I'm losing all of you in the references that I'm making throughout this. It is kind of unavoidable. Please stay with me and just look at the jingling keys. I promise this is... I'm having a lot of fun right now. Just let me have this. Yeah, that's kind of how Nekona's cooking worked, but like psychic. Basically, you would eat her food and it would essentially heal you of a lot of the problems that you would have, and this gift would actually be transferred to pretty much all of her space marines, but we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit there. So going forward, she gained the trust of her people, and as expected, the Emperor eventually found her. And I'm not kidding, she called him an idiot before he introduced himself, to which even he, for the gumption of this action, was like, oh, I like this one. She got moxie. And thus, she was inducted into the Great Crusade proper without much issue. Well, without much issue initially. See, Nekona was not one to stand by her brother's idle desire to wipe out all things that don't look human. So, she actually enjoyed helping all species, including Xenos, and what have you. But she did kind of have to put that to the wayside because a lot of the Imperium didn't really exactly smile upon that. See, her legion, the Space Maids, kind of occupied a very specific role that not other Space Marine legions would have. It kind of goes back to what I said, where there's this psychic imprint of food that heals people, and as it stands, the inspiration came from the idea of Angron being a Primarch that was supposed to fill the role of a healer and support for other Primarchs as well as other legions. Being a person who could heal and provide battlefield support. Chumi-chan actually told me that specifically, but due to the Butcher's nails, he couldn't do that, so the idea around Nekona's soup superfood and the healing properties was to take that idea and fill it out. Albeit of obviously in a more absurdist way, I think it's still really cool. And it's very fun how Chumi wanted to fill that specific niche in such a cute way. But regardless, that is the battlefield role of the Legion of the Space Maids and eventually their successor chapters, where they would essentially, during the Great Crusade, the Heresy, and the post-Heresy, they would land on planets and provide aid to the various factions that were on there that were on the side of the Imperium most times. They would be hyper-specialized in protection as well as providing delicious quality food for everybody around them. Basically, they were just walking morale boosts, wearing bright pastel colors and all that jazz. The stuff is cute as like, if you look at all of their specialized ranks and all of their various different weapons, I guess you could call them, you see that they have a lot of hyper-specialized equipment for this, like a drop pod that instead of deploying specifically troops or weapons, it opens up and has the equivalent of like a t-shirt cannon, but it fires out a small, perfectly set diner-style table in the shape of a cat paw that in the center of the drop pod there's actually a stove that the Space Marines involved would actually cook on. It's fucking awesome. And it's really cute. And the Space Marines themselves, the Space Maids, would actually work to provide guardsmen, other Space Marines, and what have you with whatever food they would want. There's other specialized ranks, like instead of having ancients and flag bearers and standard bearers, they would have the menu bearers, who would be someone who holds up the menu that the Space Maids for this specific chapter would offer to anybody who is there. It's very important to protect that menu, and it's a symbol of everything they stand for. I think it's really cute. But we're getting a little bit too into the Legion itself, so let's talk about relationships. Nekona, and specifically her relationship with her Legion, isn't specifically specified, but I assume it's pretty damn close considering they very much lined up in terms of basic principles. They both agree on the same idea of we care for those around us, not so much, I don't know, murdering everything that we disagree with. And alongside that, because of Nekona's mutations, similar to that of like Sanguinius, you had these kind of cat-like mutations that would come out in all of her Marines. So you would have like ears, nose, claws, cat eyes, each of them with their own benefits, but the majority of them would still have the weird psychic stuff that they would use to support. And alongside that, one of my favorite ranks is the weird support staff that they would have, the serfs, specifically for individuals to tend to their cat-like needs. So people who would set up scratching posts, people who would de-fur with like these giant lint brushes that would comb off all the hair that they would shed, because sometimes they do develop cat hair. I think that's very cute, but this is kind of the relationship that they had. They were very, very close. Mother-daughter type shit. So, with all the Horus Heresy being afoot, Nekona did not vibe and actually did one of the smartest things anyone could have really done and essentially became an entire legion of Black Shields. She just did not side with anybody and decided to ostensibly become a renegade that didn't help anybody unless they were within range. Like, she would offer support to anybody as long as they were, like, not obviously evil, but, you know, she didn't really pick a side, essentially, is how I was interpreting a lot of the lore. There is a bit of a blind spot here between 30k and 40k, but the implication is that leading up to the 40k era, she still provided support to the Imperium as she believed in her father's dream. And this is likely why they are allowed to be kept alive and not raged and don't have war being declared upon them at any given point. Because, you know, the moderately psychically inclined battle siblings create magic food that heals people, and that's kind of an incredibly important thing to have in the modern day. And fun fact, they actually don't think it's psychic. They aren't aware of that. I would assume they just argue with people that it's not even psychic because they just agree that it's the love they put in their food that heals people, which I think is really cute. So with that out of the way, let's wrap up a few interesting facts about the Legion itself, as well as a few other facts about Nekona that I kind of wanted to cover so that you guys have a better idea of who she is and what she does. I'm also going to be covering some of their offshoot chapters, not too in depth, but yeah. In general, Nekona, even though she operated outside of the Imperium, has in fact gotten a hold of the Primaris schematics for her Legion, and thus has a bunch of widespread successor chapters like you wouldn't expect. It never is specified exactly why she has all of these pieces of tech, but I like to think that personally it's due to the fact that she is personally helping the Imperium quite a lot and sending her daughters to aid pretty much everyone. But also, she is seen as like the daughter of literally God in the setting, so that does probably give her a bit of a gambling chip to get what she needs. Also, the fact that she can give Rabute Gilliman tea that essentially acts as an antidepressant to help him get through his long-ass workday, that helps a lot, I would assume. That helps quite a lot, actually. So, with a lot of the basics out of the way, let's talk about the Legion and the chapters, shall we? The Legion itself has a bunch of unique and different ranks as well as roles to play in the world of 40k. Most of them are for morale and service, so keep that in mind, but don't get it twisted, the Space Maids can throw down like any other Space Marine chapter. A few of my favorite are obviously the menu bearer from earlier, the hospitaller, who occupies the same niche as the apothecary, but more so for the mending of clothing and dresses and, I would assume flak armor on the battlefield, able to fix uniforms and treat up any aesthetical damage as well as any practical damage, albeit likely leaving things a bit more pink. No real formal name for it from my research, but there is a bunch of modified Dreadnought versions out there, and my favorite is the modified Leviathan Siege Dreadnought that is equipped with ovens in her chest to cook various baked goods to serve on the front line, while soaking up as much damage as humanly possible because it's a fucking Leviathan Siege Dreadnought. Oh, and how can I forget the assault delivery bikes, where the driver fights tooth and nail to get whatever food was ordered to the person who ordered it. I adore this so much, and I adore so many of these designs. They have such a level of creativity to them, all revolving around the singular idea, and that is if Space Marines were anime catgirl maids. But we're gonna break away from the unique ranks to talk chapters and successors for a minute, as there are a few. So, starting from the top, the Striped Skirts are a fun successor chapter of the Space Maids because, much like you'll see with the majority of these chapters, they have a bit of a fun gimmick. This gimmick is that they are themed after 50s roller skate diner girls who get the food to you as fast as humanly possible. Thus, they are equipped with the Phobos pattern Mark 10 armor and modified roller skates called Rider Blades. They're basically the assault troop equivalent for a Space Maid in the nicest way possible. The T-servers are the Goth Maid successor of the Maids, which obviously makes them my personal favorite for reasons I will not elaborate on. They specialize in serving drinks mostly, and only smaller meals alongside them. But the thing that sets them apart from the other chapters is their more serious and stoic demeanor. They adhere to the rules of service more so than any other of the chapters and refuse to break protocol, which is why their armor is equipped with significantly more stabilizing equipment, gyros, and so on and so forth, to make it so that they could always hold their drink trays upright without worrying about spilling a single drop. The Oven Mitts are on the opposite end of the spectrum, being a bit more boisterous of a successor chapter and significantly more explosive, specializing in baked goods so magically delicious you feel like you're eating literal manna from heaven. They are known for being actually pretty good fighters in combat, with their namesake also being a reference to these special modified power fists the Space Maids tend to use. And before you ask, yes, it looks like a fucking cat paw, so don't at me, I think it's cute. The Scrubbers are the next chapter, and they are the ones that make me realize there isn't really a specialized anti-disease chapter in 40k to my knowledge. Something that specializes in dealing with viral warfare, but regardless, the Scrubbers specialize in cleanliness and removing all forms of dirt. Their archenemy is obviously the forces of Nurgle, and because of this, they arm themselves with specialized tools to make sure they can really get into the grime-encrusted spots. Disinfection guns and so on and so forth. The White Claws are the last one that I want to talk about, and their name alone made me realize how brain poisoned I am to old memes. See, the White Claws are not a group of overly drunk individuals who are particularly violent. They're actually a group of battle siblings that, instead of being traditional cats, they're actually based off of the lynx, and thus they're significantly bigger. But also, they're if a lynx had the same job and duty as a St. Bernard. They are even bigger and bulkier and hardier for colder climates. Their whole shtick is they specialize in search and rescue, going to the most dangerous of locations to save fellers and bring them a brew that is tied around their neck known as the Seltzexen, probably not pronouncing that correctly, which rapidly raises body temperature and likely has similar healing properties that the Space Maid's food actually has. So with all those being said, those are all the known chapters that I could find outside of the Chaos Corrupted versions, which are comically enough called the Strays, but regardless, the Space Maids have such a fun history, and so too does their Primarch Nekona. There are a few fun facts that I do actually want to go over before I finish the video, but these are just things that I couldn't really fit anywhere because there wasn't really any good way to bring them up. Now, the canonness of this is not actually 100% confirmed, but I'm pretty sure it is. But it's Nekona can actually do a magical girl transformation to be a bulky as muscular version of herself, because normally she just looks kind of normal with basic human proportions, but in order to fit in her armor, she goes into a Primarch form, which I think is kind of cool. Think Biscuit from Hunter x Hunter. Next, there is in fact catweed. Yeah, they have a bit of lore where, much like the Space Wolves trying to find a way to create alcohol that affects their bodies, Space Maids have found an herb that, when smoked, causes similar narcotic effects. Yes, they are smoking super catnip, and yes, it is really funny as a mental image to see a Space Marine rolling up a blunt before making cookies and ice cream for a guardsman detachment. But you know what? I see the funny thing, and I like the funny thing. The last thing I want to bring up is that even though these interesting individuals tend to lean towards the whimsical side of things, there is some grimdark lore in their lore. And it kind of pokes its head through the menu bearers, the ones that I mentioned earlier, the ancients that hold up the menu for the different individuals to read and order from. Who do they order to, though? They don't go directly to the menu holder. No, they go to the servitors, which are servitors that were created with the express purpose of gathering the orders of the people on the battlefield to bring to the maids to prepare. It's nothing too dark, but it is a level of grimdark that I think fits and adds to the whimsy rather than detracts from both, and doesn't really contrast with it, but I really like the design of it as well. But with all that out of the way, I want to say my final thoughts are this. I love this. I think it is cute. I think it is fun. And I think creativity like this is super common in 40k. There is this idea that I like to describe. I don't know if it's already a thing, but I call it creativity in a box. Because how it works is you have to have a template, an established and hyper-focused rule set that you have to build within in order to create something that would fit within that rule set. You have limitations that you have to adhere to that are pretty strict. The best example is creating a loyalist chapter of Space Marines. They are very, very specific in how you can build these specific chapters, so you have to follow the rules of what successor are they of, where do they come from, planets, specialization, and are they codex compliant, and so on and so forth. So there is this building block set that you're given, and it is up to you to kind of piece it together, kind of like Lego. And that's kind of how Space Marine chapters and creating Primarchs is like. I think out of the box thinking where you focus on breaking the established rules is good and all, but the problem therein is when you have nothing to focus on. You have a problem around the idea not being solid enough to stand on its own. Thus, when working within the boundaries of a strict set of world-building rules, you can create shit like this, where because of the existence of the setting, you don't need to fill in all of those gaps that are already filled in by the world itself. We know what a Space Marine is, so the subversion of what a Space Marine is with the Space Maids is genuinely really nice because it's basically counter to what most people would think a Space Marine is. And I think it's light, I think it's fluffy, and I think that it's inoffensive. I think it's a very fun thing that I think more people should bring their eyes to. And I once again thank Chumi-chan for letting me talk about the Space Maids on here. He's been wonderful to work with and has been lore dumping to me ever since I went in to talk to him about this, and he's known for quite some time that I was going to do this. But yes, shit like this would never actually exist in 40k, but the creation of Nekona is one of those things that just makes me happy. To be blunt, it's the main reason I don't ever want the 2nd and the 11th Primarch to ever be brought back. It would kind of discredit these kinds of fan creations, because in my eyes, I should state, well, because those gaps aren't filled, that means any idea could be just as plausible as the others. So if you filled it in, that means that people would focus in on that rather than what people make on the side. It's why in all of the alternate heresies and alternate universes, you focus in on the parts that we don't have filled in rather than the parts that we do. It's why we remember characters like Ikari and Enisim, but we don't remember characters like Endezos and Betty. Even though they're both cool as I should add, and by the way, if you don't know who those are, please, dear God, look up the Ikarian Insurrection or any of the other tangential media for that alt universe 40k. But with all that being said, what do you all think of Nekona, the Space Maids, or the lore surrounding them and their successors? You know the drill. Let me know in the comments. I tend to peruse them and look them over from time to time. Also, remember to like the video and subscribe to support more of me covering fan content like this. I have kind of a bigger video in the mind right now, but I've got other things going on. As I mentioned, once again, I'm going to be attending Adepticon next month, and if you guys show up, you'll be able to find me at the fan meet and greet that's going to be happening there. I'm going to be going with a bunch of other 40k nerds that I tend to watch myself, so if you meet me, you're going to probably be meeting a bunch of the other people that you, I don't know, tend to follow if you follow me, like, you know, like Crackduck, Mishmash, and possibly Pancreas No Work. That's kind of whatever, but we're all going to have a great time. I look forward to seeing you all there. But before I go, I also want to issue a special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, because without your help, I wouldn't be able to upgrade my setup. I wouldn't be able to pay my editors to get this done so that I do have the time to go to Adepticon, and I wouldn't be able to do as much as I do. So make sure to thank them. Thank you. And if you want to support me as well as the production of this content, as well as my editors, then become a channel member. You get a bunch of cool perks like seeing videos the second they're up, as well as seeing members only videos, and you'd also be helping me like I've been saying. Thanks once again for watching, and have yourself a wonderful night.